Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. Today I am going to make a mixed media memorial piece, and I'm going to show you just how easy it is to build layers of meaning into our mixed media pieces. So I am starting with this napkin. It's called Watercolor Roses with Hydrangea, and it was part of a subscription box from NINNYSNAPKINS.com. And if you can't get this one, you will find other ones. Now I chose peach roses because I'm doing this as a memorial for a friend. She just recently lost her mother, and her mother, when I was talking to her, peach roses was one of her favorite flowers. So I went through my stash and I found something that was going to work with that. Now I'm just cutting out parts of this to play with my substrate, which is an 8x10 canvas board. So in lieu of doing a card, I want to do a canvas board that she can pop into a frame or display on an easel should she choose to. Now, on napkins, sometimes they have two different orientations, and that's the case here. So I'm just going to rough cut the other orientation out, and then that's going to give me options when I start deciding how I want this to go. Whichever one I don't use, oh, this little piece here, oh, that would make an interesting border. So I'm going to save that. There's lots of little interesting pieces on here that I will be saving and using on other projects. Now, my friend's mother, she had 3 daughters. So I wanted 3 of the larger roses to symbolize her 3 daughters. So instead of that hydrangea, I'll be cutting off that hydrangea and layering in the 3rd rose. And I'll just switch it up, turn it a little bit so it looks like a different rose. Now she had 2 grandchildren. So the smaller roses, the partially open buds, are going to represent the 2 grandsons. And then there's that very tiny bud, and I'm looking for another one because there were 2 great grandchildren. So we can alter a focal image using different elements from one napkin, or even bringing in elements from another napkin and making it perfectly symbolize what we want it to symbolize. So I think there I might add that. So we have, for the 3 girls, the 2 grandsons, and the 2 great-grandchildren. Now I want to add some texture onto this, and right at this point I'm not sure if I'm going to go vertically or horizontally with my orientation. I often stop and I take pictures along the way to help myself decide. But I know I want to put some texture, so I grab this kaleidoscope stencil and the TCW modeling paste, and I'm using a key card or old credit card, and I am just going to add that into 3 places. Here I'm just layering it up, matching it, and just extending it a little bit. The scale is just right for the size of the stenciling, but the struggle with the 6 inches just doesn't quite go as long as I might want it, so I have to lift it and put it back down. So I'm going to give this a good dry. Now I decided I'm going to go vertically, and I like the way the 3 areas of texture work. Now the favorite song is Amazing Grace, so I typed up the lyrics, and then I used a script font, and I made some of the words bolder and bigger so they would stand out. Now I'm going to take this and I am going to print it on tissue paper that I'll collage down. So I'm taping that tissue paper, and you can see it's full of wrinkles. You can iron it if that matters to you. And I know by not ironing it here, I'm going to get less than perfect, but because it's one of the initial layers, I'm not overly worried about that. So I'm just taping this down, making sure that it is as taut as I can make it without buckling the paper. And then I'm going to set it in my printer. Now you have to play with your own printer to see if it's going to be tissue paper up or not. Different printers operate differently. I have a laser printer. So I'm just going to cut where the tape is. And then I have some collage paper. And again, we're building in those layers of meaning. I had a conversation with my friend, asking her mom, about her mom and what's her favorite song, colors, flowers, favorite pastime. And I'm trying to incorporate some of those things that stood out from that conversation to gift to my friend. Now I could put the entire song on the background and it would show through the roses as well. I'm opting to not do that, but I think that would have looked okay too, and maybe even better. Would you have done that? Instead, I'm just ripping sections of it and going to put that in a few areas on the canvas. And I'm just ripping it because I don't want straight edges as much as possible. So I have the beginning of the song and the end of the song, you'll see. So now I want to colorize the background, but I don't want anything overpowering. So I am going in with unbleached titanium and white gesso, and I'm just rubbing that in on a makeup sponge. Now this was gessoed beforehand, before I did anything, and I actually had written, before I gessoed, the name, her birth date, the date of her death. That information is underneath, and then I did a coat of gesso and I hid that. For privacy reasons, I didn't want to share that, but it is there underneath. Now if you want to go with vintage, get yourself some unbleached titanium. I love it. I've gone through several tubes of it since I've discovered it. It's just the perfect. Now I wanted to add some dragonflies. I really love the saying, when dragonflies appear, a loved one is near. And oftentimes I'm in the garden and we get visited by dragonflies, and I feel closer to people that I've lost. So I wanted to give that to my friend. She loves spending time in her garden, and I wanted that as part of this. So this is something I want to gift her, and I'm putting this in. I'm just doing it with the unbleached titanium. It's tone on tone. It's going to be very subtle, but it's there. And when I write her a card, an explanation of this page, I will explain why I've incorporated dragonflies on there. And I'm just brayering the paint on. I find that that gives a nice coat of it. I'm quite happy with the results here. I wasn't quite sure if it was going to give me what I wanted, especially when I'm stamping over top of the modeling paste, but it worked rather well. And if it doesn't, a coat of gesso and more paint and away you go. So now I've got everything in place and I'm ready to glue down. First I'm going to glue down the tissue paper lyrics. And I'm using fluid matte medium, and I'm using a healthy dose amount of it. That is the best way to guarantee that it is going to go translucent. And I especially if you have a light background like I do and it's white tissue, it disappears. Now you have to be gentle because it's easy enough to rip the tissue paper. And I do stop in between and give this a good dry. So once that's dry, I'm going to glue down the napkin and build the focal image with the alterations that I talked about, so that the spray of roses represents this person's children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. A life well lived and well loved. There, I cut off the hydrangea and I'm putting the rose in its place. Adding the bud here. And then the tinier bud down here. Because my friend can put this in an 8x10 frame, I'm avoiding putting anything right to the edge in case the frame hides it. Now I'm taking some peachy color Inktense block on my makeup sponge and I'm rubbing this ever so lightly over top of the textured area to add a little pink to the background because that was her favorite color and to bring out the texture. And then I'm going to edge with that as well. Thank you to those of you that are subscribers to my channel. If you're not a subscriber, please consider hitting the subscribe button below. If you like this video, you'll possibly like other videos that I put out. And everyone, please check the bell and select the option to be notified of upcoming videos. Loving the subtle old roses background that's been created here. Now I'm taking the Inktense blocks and I'm running it across the edge of the canvas board, and then I'm activating it with water on my finger. This is just kind of outlining this, bringing out that peachy color, which is her favorite color. I like using my Inktense blocks for this because they are more translucent. They will let everything show underneath and they're easy to add color, to beef up color. I want to add some stamping, so I grabbed this from Stamperia. There's kind of a grid. Normally I do my script stamping, but I don't want to put more script because I have the lyrics from the song. So I wanted to add fine one, and this one, it just hits the bill, and I'm using my sepia archival ink. I thought black was a little too stark. I'm just putting that in multiple places on the canvas board. I decided that I wanted to edge the page, so I'm using black and I'm going around the outside edge. Some of this is dripping in where the texture paste was, the modeling paste, and it's just really bringing out the lettering and adding to the vintage vibe that we're going for. I want to get this canvas board to a state where if she just puts it in an easel, it still looks presentable, or if she puts it in a frame, I'm not losing anything. Now I'm using the Inktense blocks. I'm using some peachy color and red color and orange color, and just beefing up the color of the roses here. And I'm adding just a smidge of white gesso. That's off to the right side. And I'm just adding more color. And I spend a little bit more time off camera. This isn't exactly interesting, but I just keep tweaking it, adding darker colors and light tones as I go. And I find great success using the Inktense blocks. Now, if you're not familiar with Inktense blocks, they are water activated, but they are ink. And that means they are permanent when they are dry and fully activated, and like watercolor. So when I go at the end here and I varnish this with Minwax polycrylic varnish, it will not reactivate. I'm edging this with black because I want a finished edge, because if she doesn't put it in the frame, I want it to look finished and neat and tidy. Now my dragonflies disappeared a little bit, and I thought maybe I wanted to add gold, but before I splattered with gold, I decided to add some gold dragonflies. And instead of using gold paint, which you can use, I grabbed some TCW stencil butter, champagne gold, and I'm stamping with that. That's making it gives it a little bit more texture. And again, these dragonflies are very subtle, but I love the little bit of shimmer that they have, that iridescence that dragonflies often have. And I love how the yellow warms up the page. Now, if you use acrylic paint with your stamps or modeling paste like I am, or stencil butter, you just make sure you spray it, clean it, scrub it with a toothbrush so your stamps don't get wrecked. And here I'm going to just splatter with the paint. So we built up layers of interest, pattern, texture, but we also added layers of meaning. And that's one of the things we can do when we create our own art. We can personalize it and make our pieces so meaningful and so special. Thank you again for joining me. Until next time, go get creative.